Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning Committee. There are no fire drills planned tonight, so if you do hear the fire alarm, do follow us and run to the exits. The agenda will be taken as in the order paper, and we'll have a short break after item 21/P2351, or after 1.5 hours, whatever comes first. And we'll take the last item of business at around 10:30. And those in the room, please do come to the front and take water. It is very hot in here with everyone. I'll just briefly outline the process for those new here, both in person and online. Each of the items will follow the same process, each of the applications rather. So we'll have officer presentation of the application and reference to the modification sheet. And then we'll have speakers. So first we'll have the objectors with as a slight change in how we do things, because we're iterating and changing and improving things. We're going to have the ward councillors and then the applicant and agent. We'll then have the officer's response, who may reference previous answers from the technical briefing. And then colleagues here in the committee will take up to 3 questions at a time. So this isn't comments. And then after that, we'll move to comments and general observations. We may need a short debate depending on if we discuss conditions, and we'll move to the vote, where we'll start with asking those voting against, not voting, and voting for. So again, hopefully that's clear. So I've had apologies this evening from Councillor McGrath, and we've got Councillor Kirsten Galea joining us. Have we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Sherry?
Yes, Chair. I just wanted to declare that I declared a pecuniary interest on the first item up for consideration at the previous committee meeting. However, my pecuniary interest no longer stands at this time, so I will be taking part in the full full voting process. And I have consulted with our head of legal, and she has given me advice that I am sound to do this.
Brilliant. Thank you for drawing that to the committee's attention. Any further declarations? No? Brilliant. Okay. So minutes from the previous meeting. Can I take them as read and agreed as a true and fair, accurate account? Can I get a seconder? Ed, agreed. Thank you very much. So we're going to go on to our first item. So that's 22/P2351. That's 107 homes, including social and affordable housing, 100% electric car charging provision, significant seal contribution plus sporting facilities. Tim, please kick us off.
Thank you, Chair. If you bear with me for just a moment, we're having some technical difficulties linking to the screen, but
that's fine.
It should only be a couple of moments.
Well, in those brief moments, I'll fill the gap with to let the committee know we've got Tom Sly, hopefully I pronounced his surname correctly, and Tara Butler here, who will answer questions on anything relating to flooding and the sporting aspect respectfully. And again, just draw attention to the modification sheet, because there are 2 updates on those issues there that you'll find.
My apologies, Chair. We're now ready. Good evening, members. Here is the site location plan. So I don't know if there's a bit of feedback coming through here. I'm just going to turn my volume down. So you can see the site location plan here off Grand Drive. Sorry, bear with me. Oh, thanks. Here you can see the position of the site with Grand Drive to the east and the main entrance to the site at Meadowview. Also pedestrian entrances at either end here. Here you can see the existing site with development to the north of Meadowview and the tennis club here. Photos of the existing site, currently fenced off and has been for a number of years. A playground on the site, which is also fenced off. The existing development to the north. And here you can see across to the tennis club courts. I'll run through the, sorry, somebody's not seeming to show. I do have a site plan there. I'll run through the elevations. If you'd like me to stop on any of these or come back to them, please do say, but there are quite a few. So I'm going to run through them quite quickly just to give you a feel for the type of buildings. They are the same form and design as those that came before the committee previously. Here you can see the site layout. So the housing situated here, a main promenade here leading down to a destination space with the open space wrapping around the built form. 2 tennis courts here, a 5-a-side pitch and a multi-use games area, along with an outdoor gym, play area and wetland area. So some views across the site, and again, a layout there. This shows story heights across the development, generally speaking, higher up here and becoming lower across the site. So I'm just going to go through this bit quickly because this document was not supposed to be here. It was a plan of the tennis court lighting. Here you can see the private versus affordable housing units proposed. Again, as per the previous application, as these. Sorry, bear with me. Sorry, bear with me. I'm just going to start the presentation again. I'm not quite sure what's happened there. Okay. So more of the house types which are around the site. These are listed in the report, a number of different house types and character areas. Another view of the site, this relates to urban greening, so you can see the different surfaces throughout the site. This is the indicative layout put forward by the Cricket Consortium. This is an indicative position of a cricket pitch and a rugby pitch. And then you have the flood zone area covering this part of the site. I'll leave it on this page to talk through because the comparison with the previous application is going to be a key consideration in this current application. So you can see that the layout is the same. The color of the roofs is different, but that's just a different roof tile. Otherwise, they are identical. The differences being the addition of the five-a-side pitch here. 100% electric charging parking is now proposed. And also the off-site contributions for sports facilities within the borough has increased. Now you'll note that there is an error in the report, and that was due to the double counting in the totaling of those figures. What is set out at page 151 under the title Section 106 Requirements / Planning Obligations is correct. It's simply the overall total was incorrect. So previously 924,000, and this application they would total up to 1.8 million. The change to the layout required updated information in relation to surface water runoff, and that's because of the new surface of the five-a-side pitch added here. Both the council's flood risk officer in his capacity as lead local flood authority and the Environment Agency raised no objection. It is of note that the previous scheme did not feature flooding issues as a reason for refusal. The key planning considerations are set out at page 113 of the report. However, the main consideration for members will be whether the current proposal has overcome the previous reason for refusal, as other planning issues were considered to be acceptable. So the single reason for refusal, that is set out in the report. The planning benefits were not considered to outweigh the harm by virtue of the loss of open space. As with the previous proposal, officers conclude that the proposed development would be acceptable in planning terms. The concerns raised by Sport England are noted and have been carefully considered, but officers conclude that a sporting use of the entire site has not been shown to be deliverable. This is due to funding gaps, in particular the lack of any drainage and flood mitigation measures in the costings. Details of this are set out in the mod sheet at page 7 and also at page 35. Therefore, members should consider whether the enhanced on-site publicly available sporting uses and financial contributions towards off-site sporting uses provide a sufficient planning benefit to warrant the partial loss of open space. Officers conclude that the enhanced package of mitigation measures would outweigh the loss of open space, and the recommendation is for approval subject to a Section 106 legal agreement and conditions as set out at page 154 and in the mod sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim, and for persevering with the technology as well. What we're going to do now is have objectors speak first. So I've got two objectors here. Apologies if I do mispronounce your names. Is it Shamak and then John? We've got here, brilliant, and John, fantastic. So Shamak, I understand you're going first for 3 minutes. Fantastic. If you would kick us off, please.
Sure. Thank you, committee members, for giving me the opportunity to speak over here. I'm sure each of you would have already gone through the technical details around flooding issues, lack of infrastructure, sporting usage, so on and so forth. I would like to make a few points for your consideration today. Point number one, this particular application was rejected by this very committee back in June. And as Tim, the council officer, said at the beginning, everything is same. It just is a surprising thing that again, this same application has come over. Point number two, which I would like to highlight, is in terms of the sporting viability, there are two proposals which are on the table. One is from Surrey Cricket, a reputable organization. The second one is from a cricketing consortium, and their funding is, their costing, they have done their full costing, they have got full funding, the capex is paid upfront, they have done an OPEX funding as well. OPEX cost is 32% of annual revenue. And more importantly, their proposal has been looked at by ECB and Surrey as well. Sports England has supported them, so has RFU. I would like to make a couple of quick points from Sports England. Number one, Sports England has said that as long as there's demand for a playing ground, and S106 mitigation or otherwise should not be considered, is not coming into the picture. The only time mitigation should come into picture is when there is no demand for a sporting ground. So I would like to highlight that point. The second point that I would like to highlight again is the consortium that has put in place a proposal and has been doing that for a long time, but has not received much engagement from the applicant, from Bellway. They are looking to develop grassroots sports. And to be frank, tomorrow's Joe Roots, Ben Stokes, and Stuart Broads will not get a chance, will not develop if today are not allowed the opportunity to play grassroots cricket. I would appeal to the committee members, please stand by the little people. The very point I made last time round, we little people are really frustrated over the last few months about always us following the rules, but rich and powerful bending the rules on their whims. There was a planning condition imposed to put this ground for use of the community for sports, and that has not been met, and there's been a number of obstacles created. No engagement with sports clubs who do want to use this. The RFU rugby union is also involved. These are not small organizations. These are not random organizations. These are national sports bodies who have said there's a viable sporting opportunity on this ground, and they are backing this. I would end by just hoping that the committee members consider Sports England's views, which has been tabled along with the consortium's fully costed proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, can I ask you to make your representations, please?
Thank you. 3 months ago, this committee refused Bellway's second application to build on the lesser sports field. The reasons given were that the application was fundamentally contrary to the development plan and NPPF, and there were not considered to be any solutions to resolve the conflict. That decision was supported by Sport England, which verified the costed proposals by the consortium of 2 cricket clubs and an established mixed junior school. This is the third application Bellway has made within 2 weeks of the official decision and without any consultation at all with the community or sports bodies. They made it on the 2nd of August in the school holidays, hoping no doubt that this would diminish the number of local objections below those of the 250 residents last time. This application does not comply in the slightest with the committee's decision that the whole of the ground should be retained for sport or with Merton's planning guidance. It has the same number of buildings on a smaller and therefore denser area. The only difference is a small area of extra play space and a promised inducement to the council of funding elsewhere. There is no evidence to show that funding improvements to local playing fields already heavily used can benefit sports to the same extent as the consortium's proposals. The leader of the council wants to improve sports provision. This ground is not surplus as it's wanted by viable sports organizations. The law is clear that planning committees should make consistent decisions. This hurried application is yet another example of the cynical behavior of this company. Bellway bought the land on the basis that a planning inspector in 2010 decided that only 44 units of accommodation could be built. He approved it as an enabling development to allow the remainder of the ground to be retained for sports, especially for juniors, and with the construction of a pavilion. There were to be 500 hours of community use. There is written evidence that Bellway sold the 44 units to the purchasers on the promise that they would be overlooking open land, hence Meadowview Road. Local residents have ever since been trying to hold Bellway to their commitments. They have ignored every effort by us or by schools or sporting bodies to allow the land to be used for sport. Instead, they've fenced off the land, including a playground promised for their purchasers, so that none of it could be or has been used. The consortium, and there's a member of the consortium here tonight, is still keen to take a long lease of the land. Sport England continue to support them and to oppose this application. Sporting use is clearly deliverable within the planning guidance. This application ought to be rejected also, as the neighbouring streets have been flooded 3 occasions in the last 10 years, and the proposed flood attenuation scheme would be inadequate, just like the one built by Berkeley Homes in Wimbledon Hill Park. There is already approval to build 456 flats on the Tesco site nearby, of which 143 are affordable. This more than meets the council's targets for this area. There is also major traffic congestion in Grand Drive and a woeful lack of surgeries and school places.
John, thank you very much.
And we urge the committee to uphold their previous decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have the ward councillors wanting to speak now as well. Ed, sorry, you have something to say?
Excuse me, Chair. Is it possible to have the speakers up on the screen? Yeah, thank you.
Apologies. Thank you so much for drawing it to my attention. Thank you. So we've got three councillors to speak. Robert Page, Hina Bakari and John Oliver. Have you decided who wants to speak first? Okay. Yeah, do you want to speak first? Yeah, go for it. Yep.
Good evening. My name is John Oliver. I'm a councillor in West Barnes, where the lesser playing fields are located. Fellow councillors Robert Page and Hina Bakari are joining us virtually, and we'll do it in that order. And we'd like the 9 minutes to be split between us. So don't cut me off if I'm still going after 3. Once again, we're here to consider the fate of the lesser playing fields. I know that members of the committee can be trusted to approach their difficult task with open minds, but they're only human. Last night, we had a full council meeting with housing or lack of it as the main theme. Everyone agreed that there's a dire shortage of housing, especially affordable housing in the borough, particularly in its eastern areas. And in this application, there are 44 affordable homes. However, running a council is a matter of making trade-offs. We heard from Councillor Irons and others yesterday about the importance of green spaces in the borough. And of course, Merton has been declared a borough of sport. And the council also has aspirations to improve the health of the residents of the borough. All of these aspirations have to be balanced. The local plan balances this by saying the following. Sporting and community use of the entire site will have to be proven to be undeliverable before any other uses can be considered. Therefore, the intention of the plan is clear. If at all possible, this site is to be used for sporting and community purposes in its entirety. Before even considering an alternative use, we're obliged to study the plans for sports. It's not a case of do we like them, or do we want sports, or do we want houses? It's a case of the sports plans have to be proven to be undeliverable. The task of the committee, therefore, seems to be first and foremost to decide whether the plans that have been presented to you have been proven to be undeliverable. Only if they have been, can alternatives then be considered. So the main job is to come to a view about the deliverability or otherwise of the sports proposals, and only if they're inadequate should we go on to consider Bellway's proposals. This area of my ward is already due to have 456 new dwellings, as John mentioned, constructed on the Burlington Road Tesco site. When canvassing hundreds, if not thousands of houses before the May election, the Tesco development was frequently discussed. Everybody, without exception, agreed that this site should be developed for housing with as much affordable housing as possible. Some residents even suggested ways to increase the density. Why am I telling you this? Because the residents of West Barnes are not NIMBYs. They support development where appropriate. But all these new residents will need access to some open space, especially since their new houses will be located alongside the A3 trunk road. The lesser playing fields will provide that opportunity if they are still there. So we, the residents of West Barnes, ask the committee to consider carefully the proposals of the Sports Consortium and to remember that the burden of proof is on the applicant to prove that these proposals are undeliverable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hina, online, you've got just under 6 minutes.
I think it's actually Robert next.
Oh, Robert, sorry, apologies.
Yes, I'm happy to go next, and I'll be quite brief. I just want to pick up a couple of topics that I think John has covered pretty well. As PAC members will be aware that you'll have received a substantial number of comments against this development, and there are a few key themes residents feel really strongly about. Mainly that the application is substantially the same as the one rejected in June, and decision making should be consistent across meetings, and residents really looking to see the same outcome this time round. And as John mentioned, residents are really upset about having to respond again over such a short time to what is, substantially the same request against a professional, well-resourced developer. The change in the proposal includes additional funding for sports at Sir Joseph Hood Memorial Playing Fields, but this is a really busy site. If you go down and have a look on a Saturday or Sunday, you'll see it heavily used. And there doesn't seem to be an assessment of what the additional funding would achieve in terms of increased sporting use, especially when the alternative for the borough is an entirely new site brought into use. It seems pretty clear that that would provide greater benefit and greater sporting use than the financial contribution the applicant has proposed. To follow on slightly from what John has just said about the Cricket Consortium, the consortium has been keen to speak to sort of council officers for some time and secured a meeting on the 14th of September, so just last week. And while I appreciate the officers have made comments that they don't see the plan as delivered at this point, I believe the consortium should be allowed time to take that feedback on board and respond before any decision is made. The consortium does believe it has the required funding in place, and they should be allowed to prove this, develop their plans and allow that process to play out. I feel at the minute the timeline is being set more by the developer than by the council's own process, and there's an opportunity to take stock, take some time, and then allowing the council and the officers to work with the consortium to review the proposals in full. And if at that point they come to the conclusion that the consortium is not deliverable, then I think we can say fair enough. But until that process is played out, it seems deeply unfair that we're sort of rushing on to the next application really quickly after the last one. That's the only additional points I wanted to make, and I will hand over to Hina at that point.
Thank you so much. I think that Councillor Page and Councillor Oliver have really summed up very well what the position is in terms of many of the residents. And I just want to go through some of the things that the residents have said to me and to Councillor Page and Oliver. They are quite damning of the whole process that Bellway have gone about this proposal. They've been considered to be dishonest. They've been considered to be acting not in good faith, lacking in consultation, and having very poor communication. And in there's some evidence as well to say that they have been using dishonest tactics, for example, doing petitions in areas that don't even relate to the local area that Leicester is in. Now, that is fair enough in terms of the opinions of the residents, but they have been ignored. And I think this is the crux of this. We need more time for the residents and myself and the other councillors and other resident associations to really consider this proposal. This sporting proposal from the Cricket Consortium should be considered carefully before we make any decisions. And we do know that the local plan is very specific about this position on the lesser ground. It is supposed to be designated for sporting and community use. That position has not changed. And the decision made by the last planning committee was based on that premise, to follow the local plan. How can that decision be now reversed? There is nothing in this new proposal to suggest otherwise, that there is, this plan has in no way changed significantly enough to really change the position of the planning committee today. So in essence, I think the people of West Barnes and many of the people here are disappointed if the proposal does go through. It is incredibly unfair. We know that we have a very good proposal here from the Cricket Consortium. We've had hundreds of emails and letters written to us. Everyone is supporting the Cricket Consortium idea and the bid. It's something that we really think is worthwhile. And if the council leader is true to his word, where he says that he wants Merton to be a great sporting borough, improving sports provision in parks and green spaces, then that commitment needs to be shown here for the lesser ground and for the people of West Barnes. They really do deserve this sports ground. And I'd really hope that you make the right decision today, because it will be a benefit to everyone here in Merton.
Thank you, Hina. So can I just, while I appreciate that the public gallery would like to show their support or otherwise, as I said in our first meeting and this was the first item of business I took as chair of planning, the committee will go a lot quicker if we don't have interruptions for applause or boos. So I appreciate that, but if we can do that. So yes, so can we now take Gregory Evans and then Julian Goodman?
Chair, would you mind if we did it the other way around and that I go first? My name is Julian Goodban.
Of course.
Is that okay? Thank you. Good evening. My name's Julian Goodban. I'm from Bellway Homes. We listened and took stock from the previous committee back in June, so I'm pleased to be supporting these proposals to you this evening. This revised application has expanded and improved the previous application. We have more on-site sports facilities and a doubling of funding for off-site sport uses. A key component of this application relates to the potential loss of a potential sporting use. But this site has never before been open for the public. It was owned by the London Electricity Sports and Social Association, a private facility for the sole use of company employees. The grounds closed in the year 2000, so there is no loss of an existing facility. In terms of a potential sporting use for the whole site, the council's own assessment is that given the upfront site preparation costs and lack of secured funding, sports use is not a deliverable option. There is therefore no potential sporting use available that is deliverable. Nonetheless, significant sporting facilities and investment is to be provided. There will be 2 tennis courts, a multi-use games area, and a 5-a-side pitch, all available for public sporting use. There will also be a play area for use by existing and new residents, as well as an outdoor gym and trim trail. Those are the on-site improvements, but we're also looking at the needs of existing sports facilities off-site. We now have a package of financial measures to improve the quality of existing facilities. These include £1.1 million to the improvement of the Joseph Hood Recreation Grounds, including a new cricket wicket and improved changing rooms in order to assist grassroots cricket. £100,000 will go towards the old Wimbledonians Rugby Club to improve their pitch for rugby and other sporting uses. A further £30,000 will go towards the borough-wide Girls Rugby Development Fund, managed by the council. It's important not to forget the previous other benefits of the previous application. We have maintained our commitment to 41% on-site affordable housing with a policy-compliant 10-year split. The scheme continues to be highly sustainable with air source heat pumps, solar panels, electric vehicle charging points, and flood mitigation measures. So to sum up, this application will open the site to the public for the first time in its history. Indeed, almost half of the entire site will be, in fact, public open space. It will provide over £1.8 million in sports investment in the borough. This is a significant material planning benefit. Your officers agree that this application is significantly better in terms of the on and off-site sport contributions. And finally, but very importantly, the scheme will deliver much needed affordable housing with a policy compliant mix. Thank you, and we hope that you accept your officer's recommendation for approval. Now pass to Greg to pick up some further details.
Thank you. I'm Gregory Evans from Savills, the agent for the applicant, and I want to respond to the Consortium of Groups proposal for the site. That proposal has been reviewed and we have identified a number of flaws in it. For instance, using Sport England and market data costs, the proposed pavilion construction cost is at least £500,000 more than the consortium suggests. There are no costs for relocating the existing attenuation tanks at the site. There's no costs for delivering a required flood management strategy. There's no costs for the five-a-side pitches that they mention. And we also believe that their costing for the cricket nets is significantly underestimated. The consortium suggests that they have a sponsor which would provide 70%, that's at least £700,000 of capital funding. Yet there is no robust evidence that the sponsor is committed to this or that these funds are available. Overall then, while we don't doubt that the consortium has good intentions, they have not demonstrated a plan for a deliverable sporting use. Your own officers conclude that there is no deliverable sporting use at the site by the consortium, or indeed by any other group. By contrast, this application before you tonight is fully deliverable. It provides sports facilities and investment alongside much needed new homes and affordable housing. Therefore, we respectfully request that members follow the officer's recommendation and approve this application this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I'd like to bring Tim back in, and he may bring Tara and other officers just to comment or add any further clarifications from the questions raised, and then we'll open up to questions from the panel.
Thank you, Chair. Only a couple of points. Just to indicate that yes, 456 units have been permitted recently at Tesco, but I just want to point out that those would be delivered over several years rather than immediately meeting the housing need in that part of the borough, so to speak. Bear with me. In terms of the timing of this application, of course, we do have to assess the application as it stands before us. And then the only other point I was going to make was covered in any event, but it is private land, has never been available to the public. Previously was private and then left inaccessible following the previous appeal decision where neither the council nor King's College took up the Section 106 option to use the land, which has led to the current application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm now going to open up questions to the floor. So we'll do rounds of 3 at a time, 1 question at a time. Hands up for first round. Does anyone? So we've got Dan, Tom, and Kirsten. So in that order, Dan.
I just wanted an update on one of the points raised at the technical briefing about how Bellway are twin tracking right now this application and the appeal for the previous application. So is there some scope for a type of legal agreement contingent on the decision made today, whereby if it is approved or not approved, if it's approved, for instance, we can somehow create a legal agreement tying their hands for this better application with more money to the community and better EV charging, rather than them holding all the cards, having this in their back pocket and still trying to push through an appeal.
Good question, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Given it's only 3 months that we were last here considering this application, and certainly in the context of the actual development, it's not changed an enormous amount. Could the officers give a view on our refusal reason the last time around, that it was contrary to the London plan, the core planning strategy, the sites and policies plan? If nothing's changed and not very much time has passed, what's the basis for why those reasons don't still stand?
Fair question, Kirsten.
My question is very similar. I noticed that there isn't a lot of detail on the accessible and adaptable, the M42 and M43. I mean, I noticed that there's 10 housing for M43, but nothing about M42, which should be in theory 90% of the buildings. So that might mean that then the development might not be feasible if they relook at the spacing for that. So if let's say it's M42, the rest of the buildings. If it isn't, are there other things that it's not meeting the London plan? Do we know where we're not meeting the London plan? Thanks.
Thank you. So 3 good questions there. So in reverse order, we've got obviously Kirsten's point about accessibility and all, and are we aware of other issues or variation from the London plan? Tom's point about really digging into the detailed differentiation between this application and the last application, and Dan's one about the public gallery may not be aware too that Bellway is potential or has lodged or will potentially lodge an appeal against the first decision. Is there a condition that could be placed on this application whereby it is agreed that only this application were to be have primacy if it was indeed supported by the committee?
So, Chairman, just going back to the first question from Councillor Johnston, the situation is that when the last planning application was refused, Bellway reacted to that by notifying the council that there was an intention to appeal against that application. But at the same time, Bellway was considering a resubmission of an application with the differences outlined before you today. So there were 2 options available to the company. The preferred option was to resubmit an application with the differences. On that basis, Bellway has not actually gone ahead with lodging an appeal. And they do genuinely want members of the Planning Applications Committee today to consider this application without an appeal running alongside it. So to secure that position, and should members be minded to grant planning permission this evening, subject to a Section 106 agreement, the offer that Bellway has made is that as part of that legal agreement, they would be willing to offer not to appeal against the previous decision. So the council would only be faced with one decision, the one tonight. They've offered not to appeal against the previous application, but they only have a limited amount of time to appeal. So that is that they have to work within that time limit. So what they've said to the council is that if there can be a resolution to grant planning permission, and the Section 106 agreement with that clause in it and the decision notice can be finalised before the 1st of December, which is within their time limit to appeal, then they will sign the legal commitment not to appeal. That previous refusal will fall away, the application will no longer be relevant, and the council will only be facing one prospect, and that is the development of the scheme before you tonight.
Thank you for explaining that and the detail of that, and that's good to understand. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back on the other questions. Yes, recently refused application. There have been changes though. The sports facilities on site have been enhanced. The contributions for off-site sports have been increased. The previous reason for refusal raised concern that the planning benefits did not outweigh the harm. Therefore, the planning benefits being increased is a change from that previous application and requires a balancing of those issues. In terms of accessible housing, my understanding is that the 10% would meet M43 and that the remainder would meet M42. And you can see that at 7.6.12 onwards. I would also set out to the committee that they are required to meet these building regulation requirements in any event. So it is something that will be a requirement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, especially clearing up the latter point about the building regulations on accessibility. That's really important. Second round, I've got a question, but I'll defer my question actually then. Susie, Sherry-Ann, and then Martin. Susie.
just be grateful if John could clarify. If the committee refuses the application tonight, Bellway's position is that they still have the right to appeal the former application because they're within time and they've made no commitment not to do so. Am I right?
Can we do it as a 3 and then we'll go back? I know it's a simple question, but yeah. Sherry-Ann?
Hi, I'm going to cheat and have 2 questions in one. I realize that I obviously didn't participate in this debate before, so I'm sorry if this was asked and answered, but can I confirm where the affordable units will be located? Are they all in one core block or are they pepper potted within the site? And further to that, can we confirm that all publicly available sort of amenity space will be available to all residents and not just those in social housing? So if there's some kind of new play space provision or anything, that it will be available to all residents on site.
Good question. Martin?
Yeah, my point is obviously in relation to the additional financial contributions for sporting provision in the area. Obviously, in terms of identifying where this can actually be spent, because obviously my concern is obviously there is this additional money, but there is finding a use for it and finding some way forward to work with a group to ensure that this is actually deliverable in terms of it and in terms of any section 106 agreement. Whilst it is welcome, it's obviously, will it actually happen?
I think 3 fair questions. So work in reverse. Martin actually took part of my question. The schemes identified previously, so I think we're talking Joseph Hood and others, are they deliverable with the 106? Sherry-Ann's point about where are the affordable units pepper potted, and is all the facilities available to all residents in that site? And Susie's point about Bellway's position, if the committee were to refuse the application, do they have the right of refusal still? John, do you want to pick that last one up first?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The position would be if the planning committee tonight decides to refuse planning permission for the scheme before you, then Bellway would have the right to appeal against both the previously refused application and this one that we are considering. I understand that there's been some concern raised by residents about the council, considering an application again so quickly and with the differences that have been set out. In my professional view, it is highly likely that if Bellway decided to appeal both the previously refused scheme and this one, which they will be entitled to do, my professional view is it is highly likely that a planning inspector would accept both appeals and take them together for consideration.
Interesting. Tim, can you guide us through Sherry-Ann's point and Martin's point? And maybe, I don't know if Tara, you've got a point to add on the last one.
Thank you, Chair. Here's a plan showing the layout of affordable housing and market housing. So the blue is private housing, the yellow is affordable housing. The little red bit, which I think you can see there, is affordable social rented, with the green being shared ownership. The idea is that they are tenure blind. So visually, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the affordable units and the market units. In terms of the public space across the site, this is a key issue. The benefit of the open space, the public space, is not realised unless it is available to all and sundry. So it won't be simply existing residents and existing residents. It will be any member of the public who come and use that, and they'll be secured by the Section 106 legal agreement. My understanding is that the playground here that is not available to be used by other people has been fenced off by the residents association of this group, but I don't have full information on that. It's not part of this proposal at the moment, but we are aware that that playground there has not been available to the wider public. So this is something in particular that will be secured through the legal agreement. In terms of the contributions and the deliverability, they are indicative spending plans, so the council would reserve the right to put them towards other sports facilities within the borough if, for whatever reason, the situation changed. We wouldn't be bound spend them on those specific projects, but we would have the flexibility. Those are indicative spending plans to illustrate where they could be spent. Thank you, Chair.
Just to add to that final point, Chair, to make sure that the off-site contributions were genuinely deliverable, Bellway approached the Council's Leisure Services team to look at sites in the area that were in need of upgrade. That information is also available in Merton's playing pitch strategy that was published in 2019, which identifies public and private sites that needs upgrading. As stated in the report at paragraph 3.38, the investment looked at was at Joseph Hood, which is a nearby site which provides cricket and other pitches. It looked at girls rugby as well, and other pitch maintenance in the area where the site is. So it's a worked up plan.
Thank you very much. A third round. Anyone else? Tom again. I've got a question. Does anyone else have another question? Nope. Okay. Tom.
Just looking at the additional paper that was distributed earlier today, the sort of summary of the discussions with the consortium and the officer's comment is that there's queries that remain outstanding and that there's insufficient information about the deliverability of the proposals. The discussion that we had at the last meeting was that essentially by approving the application, all of those discussions would cease because this would, there would be no reason to continue having those discussions. Given that the meeting with the consortium was only a week ago, and we published a paper today saying that there was insufficient information, it doesn't seem that the amount of time has been given that actually that anyone could have ever have come forward with that information. I feel if the sort of shoe was on the other foot, would officers feel, if they were the ones being asked for information, would officers feel a week, less than a week is a sufficient amount of time to come forward with more information that they were being asked for?
Thank you. And so my question actually was, it was trying to understand actually the wider strategic context. So how does our 5-year land supply or the issues and risks that were raised by the local plan hearings that we've been having, how does that factor into this as a material consideration? And since we haven't got a third question, I'll ask again, going on to the consortium and the viability of their scheme. From the evidence we've heard verbally and the evidence written, and from the argument and the 3 months between the previous application and this application, can you fill in the gap some more with additional colour? Because taking Tom's point, while I appreciate it may be a week since that meeting, in my mind it's been 3 months since the previous application to now, and there may be a lot of colour that may or may not be included for a variety of reasons. Can we just add some further detail if there's any additional points to be made that's material? So to recap Tom's point about what would you expect if it was on a foot in terms of viability and to prove a case, and my points in relation to the 5-year land supply, and actually over the 3 months since the application, what has happened with the consortium in engagement and the viability assessment of those plans.
Chair, I can take the first and the third comment and pass the others over to my colleague. On the point of time and the amount of time taken with this site, it's worth members being aware that back in 2017, the council started a playing pitch strategy, working with Sport England and with the Rugby Football Union, the Football Foundation, the English Cricket Board as part of a group. And that took 2 years. And during that time, we looked at Lessa and other sites right across the borough, public and private. And at the very end of the strategy that was adopted by the council in 2019, we're giving extra 6 months for some sites to be looked at, recognizing that although we'd had 2 years looking at them and no viable sporting proposals had come through from any of the sporting bodies in that time, maybe an extra 6 months at the end might give more time to come forward. Should be noted at that time, the sporting bodies didn't put forward viable sports proposals for this site. So moving on to 2022, as members are aware from the committee reports, there's been the series of applications on this site and consultation. So although it may seem rushed, actually the site has been discussed with the sporting bodies since 2017 and in a fairly formal and structured way all the way through, and with an extra 6 months at the end, which is obviously long ago now. Regarding the assessment of the consortium's proposal, I know there's views that the buildings themselves are maybe not the same costs as the Sport England calculator provides for the same facilities. The consortium's costs are lower. We didn't consider that overly. We did consider that there still isn't information on drainage, which was also part of the last planning application, and there still isn't clarity as to how the site funding would be acquired. So whether funding would come for leasing the site or buying the site isn't part of those proposals. Chair, if I'm going to pass to my colleague for the second point.
Coming back on the 5-year land supply, the council is in a position currently where we cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply. In that situation, we do refer to paragraph 11D of the NPPF, which indicates in this situation that greater weight should be put to the delivery of housing effectively, and we should be looking to promote sustainable development where appropriate. So effectively, it does increase the weight to be given to the provision of housing as a result, in a nutshell. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, just to add to the point made by my colleague, the situation is where the council does not have a 5-year housing land supply. There is a test that so last time it was decided that the benefits of the scheme did not outweigh the disadvantages of losing the open space and the potential sports facilities. The test where there is no 5-year housing land supply, we're required to consider a tilted balance between 3 considerations, and they are economic, social, and environmental considerations. And if one of them is a negative, in this case, you could say that there is an impact on the environment, obviously, by creating the housing development. So where there is a negative, then that negative has to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And the benefits would be the economic benefits of the housing development and the social development and the social benefits of the sporting development associated with it. I consider it is difficult to say that the disadvantages significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. This site does not enjoy any particular environmental protection in planning terms other than being the open space. There are no special constraints other than that, such as conservation area, and it is a very high bar. Significantly and demonstrably is a high bar, so that there has to be a very large outweighing of the economic and social benefits, and officers do not consider that to be the case here.
Thank you very much. Is there another round of questions? Anything further? So I've got another question. Let me just put it up. So actually, in terms of just understanding, because John talked about in his statement about sport viability. I mean, this may be one for you, Tara, about just further digging down on the acid test for viability in a sense of the actual site itself, because there's some additional pictures there and how that would support community use. And it would be good to hear some more, Tim, about the environmental benefits, about air source heat pumps. And I'm conscious that, do we have Tom on the line talk about flooding? Is he? Yeah, I'm conscious we've not heard from him about the flood works that are proposed in this and how they mitigate or otherwise that. So 3 issues, just going back again on John Oliver's previous point about sporting viability, but in particular now talking about the actual what's proposed for the site, to the point about bringing Tom back in about flooding, and yeah, actually those 2 points will be fine if you can do that.
Thank you, Chair. I will respond in terms of environmental benefits. So the report sets out the key planning issues. You'll see that there are benefits in terms of ecology and urban greening. There'll be a net gain in biodiversity issues. The layout allows for cycle parking and walking routes, along with, of course, the trim trail and outdoor gym, which would provide benefits in and of themselves. In terms of flooding, Tom can come back on this in more detail, but there will be an improvement in terms of flooding. So flood issues that we've seen before should be improved. In terms of sustainability and construction, the new build would be built with high standards in this regard. So an on-site reduction in CO2 emissions over building control limits of almost 74%, where the policy requirement is 35%. And in addition, a carbon offset payment of 176,000 to achieve carbon neutral. As I say, that covers it really, and those taken in balance are such that the application is considered to be acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I can respond to your point about sports uses, the key test, and I'd say especially for the site, given its history, is that sports are deliverable if they're proposed. Rightly raised by people who've responded to the planning application was the application made 15 years ago that produced Meadowview Close, where some sporting elements were put in the then Section 106 agreement that unfortunately had a 5-year time limit. And as it happens, the people who were going to deliver the sports on the sites for various reasons were no longer able to, and the time elapsed and nothing happened. And I think we can all say that we don't want to get into that situation again. So our key test is that the sports are deliverable. And on paragraph 3.17 onwards, it summarizes what sporting uses are proposed in this application. There's 2 tennis courts and other tennis-related facilities on site, and importantly, they would be used and run by the Rains Park Lawn Tennis Club. So there is a sporting organisation who would deliver them. There's a 5-a-side football pitch proposed and a small multi-use games area as well. And we would make sure that these are not only secured by legal agreements, but also brought forward before any homes were completed. There are off-site proposals as well, and again, to ensure that those are genuinely deliverable and costed correctly, the applicants worked with the council's leisure team to ensure that the costs were realistic and also the proposals were realistic on sites nearby. As I mentioned before, paragraph 3.19, Joseph Hood Recreation Ground, contribution towards girls rugby, and contribution towards Old Wimbledonians Rugby Club to make the pitch more playable. Thank you.
Tom, are you able to come back on flooding?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So in terms of flooding, the southwest corner of the site is within flood zone 3, but it must be said that the majority of the site is within flood zone 1. So the majority of the site is at low risk of flooding. We have had a number of meetings with the and the consultants regarding flooding, and has changed from what we originally tabled. I must say there's not been a significant amount of change on the previous application in terms of flood risk mitigation, other than the fact that the sports pitches proposed have their own additional drainage, so there is no adverse effect, should I say, or worsening off-site. In terms of floodplain compensation, so this is providing a volume of storage to ensure that there's no increase in risk elsewhere from river flooding. There is a benefit off-site, so the modelling that has been undertaken within the flood risk assessment shows that there's an overall reduction off-site through an increase in storage. In terms of surface water risk, the site has further developed their surface water drainage strategy, and there is a number of sustainable urban drainage measures and solutions across the site. We've got swales, attenuation ponds, attenuation tanks, rainwater gardens, and a number of other storage features across the site. So effectively, it reduces the runoff from the site to the greenfield rate, in line with policy positions. So from flooding, I've presented a number of conditions that I've recommended. There was a comment earlier about a similar scheme within Wimbledon Hill Park by Berkeley Homes. The point regarding that is that there was with plan permission, and to ensure that that does not occur on this site, I've recommended a condition for a verification report by an independent engineer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tom, for feeding back on that. It's good to understand the technicals on that. So we're going to move to comments. So can I have rounds of 3 comments? So starting on the right, so Susie, Tom and Ed.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to RP6 and to the plan, I was very struck by what John Oliver said about the way this has been put throughout the report. We're talking as if it's incumbent on the consortium to prove that they can deliver this. But actually, if you look at RP6, the test is sporting or community use of the entire site will have to be proven as undeliverable before any other uses can be considered. And that's not for the consortium to prove, that's for Bellway to prove. I get that the test is very high, and this is a very difficult application now. But I am left with this. The alternatives which have been offered, the football pitch is too small, the off-site monies, we don't know where they're going to go. When there's no assessment of the impact, for example, on Joseph Hood of these proposed improvements, it may be that we need this pitch much more than we need better changing rooms. And what I would say about this green lung is that when it's gone, it's gone. And that is a massive environmental negative, which even now, and I struggle with this because I know the borough needs housing and I know it needs affordable housing, but even now, I think the negatives outweigh the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I'd agree with all of that, as well as sort of being convinced of whether or not we come to a different decision. I'm not entirely convinced we should even be having this discussion again. It sort of seems so little has changed since the last time around. The applicant said they'd listened and took stock. Well, they take stock very quickly because, as the officer said, they appealed the previous decision soon after, and then within 2 weeks they put in another application. I think the exact same points that applied last time around seem to apply now. I almost wish I'd written down whatever I said the last time around and I could have just said the same thing again, because I still think everything applies. I think the land was sold on the basis of sporting use. As Councillor Hicks said, that is on the base. That I still don't believe that could be proved to be undeliverable, and I'm still as concerned as I was the last time around about the timeline of that. If it were to be proved to be deliverable tomorrow, once this has been approved, it's been approved. There's nothing more we can do about it. It's the green lung's gone, the sporting use has gone. It's the decision's been taken. The discussion's over. Actually, if there had been opportunity for genuine discussion between the applicant, the council, the consortium, if the applicant had been far more cooperative, engaging with the community and with the consortium, we could have had a genuine discussion and come to a genuine view of whether there was any deliverability. And I think more than anything else, and I appreciate there's a limit to how much this influence our decision, but there is the precedent of it. Ultimately, Merton then is presenting itself as a borough where you can buy land with conditions. You can go out of your way to prove that those conditions can't be met. You can bring an application to a committee and it can be refused. And within 2 weeks, you can put in another application, and within 3 months, your next application with very few changes could be approved. And I wouldn't feel comfortable putting ourselves in that position because, as I say, I think so little has changed about the application since the last time we heard it. The reasons still stand. The negatives still outweigh the positives, and that remains my view, and nothing that I've heard has convinced me otherwise.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Chair. Both Councillor Hicks and Councillor Barlow have said a lot of what I was going to say. I don't think enough has changed since the last application. I don't think there's been enough consultation with the Sports Consortium. And as Councillor Hicks said, it is for them to prove Bellway, to prove that it's undeliverable. I don't think there's been enough consultation. There is money from various Sport England actually did a survey in the Active Lives survey and the impact of coronavirus. And there has been a massive decline in sport, particularly in young people. Age of 16 to 24 is very high. The Black, Asian and ethnic minority people are also declining sport now as well since COVID. The RFU are putting 220 million into female rugby alone. There is a big push to try and get people back into sport. We've seen the benefits of outdoor space during COVID. We all know the benefits of it. As Councillor Hicks said, once it's gone, it's gone. And it's very difficult for me to see the benefits of getting rid of another sports pitch when we're so short of them. Not long, we know there are sports clubs that don't have. There are rugby and cricket clubs around here that are looking for sites because they're being pushed out to build on. And once it's gone, it's gone. You can't get it back, and that worries me. So I haven't really changed my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, very much. Can I have a second round of comments? So Martin, Dan, and then Michael.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this application. And I think as the committee was aware that I was obviously concerned about the original application which went for the committee because I felt it didn't give enough to sport in the borough, and I felt that we could get more in terms of the overall benefit it would bring. I think we've obviously gone through in terms of sporting uses for this site, but the additional resource which would be put in would go a long way in terms of enhancing sporting facilities in the borough. And we know there is a lot of facilities around there that do need that enhancement, especially given the flooding issues that do exist in terms of some of the sporting issues. And I take on board the points that were raised in terms of that being built into any kind of consortium that would require the use of this site for that use. It is a private site. It has been always a private site, not open to public use. It will, through having an additional multi-use sports facility, actually enhance those facilities being open to the public. We know how much they are in demand across the borough, and I think this is something that is very much more welcome. I believe that this is an enhancement on the application which was previously rejected by committee, and I will be supporting this application tonight, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Dan.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me a chance to speak. So I've been listening with interest to this hearing, to the questions and to the answers and to the contributions from some of my fellow colleagues. And I note the point that when something is gone, it's gone. But something that's not going right now is the housing crisis we have right now. I have spoken to too many families, knocking on doors, speaking with residents, with mothers and grandmothers sharing beds with their teenage children, families stuck in temporary accommodations, living in one room, 5 people. I know we all share the desire to end this, to build more houses. And look at what we have right here. We have a proposal for 41% affordable housing. It's future-proof. It's 100% EV charging. We have a doubling in the contribution from the developer for the community. And in terms of the sporting bodies, and trying to find attempts at a viable proposal for sporting bodies to use these pitches, this has been ongoing since 2017. The council has proactively been working, as Tara was telling us, since 2017 to try and find uses for these pitches. And so for me, I feel like we have a choice here. We can either reject the proposal and allow residents to look at green fields, or we can support the proposal and allow residents to play on green pitches. If you want sports and you want to end the housing crisis, this is a proposal to support. So I implore my colleagues to think again and support this proposal.
Thank you very much, Dan. Michael.
This has been a difficult application, and I completely understand the range of views and opinions across the committee this evening. But for me, it ultimately comes down to 2 things. The first is affordable housing. We had a full council last night where views from across the chamber, councillors across the chamber, implored the council to get a grip and build more affordable homes. And I don't think that we can really look at ourselves and say that we are doing that if we reject an application like this with a good amount of affordable homes. The housing crisis is out of control, and if we as a borough really want to be the people to get a grips on it, then I can't see how we can refuse the application. My mind just keeps coming back to affordable housing. And when we heard last night from people, again, across the chamber, saying that we need to get a grips with affordable housing, then I think we have to act on the words that we said. And the second thing I would add is that we would be risking damage to the council's reputation to reject this application, again, going against the advice of our officers. So for those 2 reasons, and considering all the difficulties and all the range of views, and I understand the controversial nature of the application, but ultimately to me, it comes down to affordable housing and to supporting the decision of our officers. And after careful consideration, I will be voting for the application.
Thank you very much. Jill and then Sherry.
Thank you, Chair. I made a speech last night about housing, which I wholeheartedly still believe every word that I spoke last night, truly from the heart, is that we need to build and we need to get our skates on. And I find it completely disingenuous that this is viewed as a place for political point scoring by certain political sides to poke fun at us over such a serious situation where we must house people as a matter of great urgency. So let me be clear, I find that disingenuous. The second thing is, we have developers left, right, and centre all over this borough who are hanging on to bits of land. And the sooner we start releasing these blocks of land and getting people housed, the better. If we stop this developer for 1 more year, 1 more month, we are not doing anyone a service because it will keep coming back. There is no question. And it is their land. They own it. And forgive me, but to be perfectly honest, you've had 22 years to get the sporting consortiums to put their hands in their pockets and provide you with what you see now as the alternative. Well, how long does it take? So I'm sorry, but my decision remains that we must absolutely go forward with this application. I know it's not a popular decision for very many of you, but to say that Tesco's is building a few houses up the road is not an excuse on any level to refuse an application. So I am supporting.
Thank you. And Sherry Ann, and then I'll conclude.
Thank you very much. And I apologize if I coughed, just getting over it. I just wanted to echo everyone else's remarks. I do want to take time to just say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to write to me, both objectors and supporters, as there were quite a few supporters who did write to me on this one at the second time around, and I have read and considered everything really carefully. As the ward councillors for the site are very keen to point out to the leader regarding sports provision, I would like to highlight that many of their fellow colleagues did speak quite strongly last night in favour of affordable housing within the borough. Indeed, one of them spoke about this very site. So I would hope that we would consider the significant quantum of affordable, which, by the way, is also rented accommodation as well as shared ownership, and the improvements to the sports contribution that have come as a result of the rejection of the application last time, and consider the cost and potential loss of benefits for the borough as a result of the appeal in this decision. Essentially, our hands are tied a lot by the planning system, and I wish that we weren't, but we are. And I cannot see how refusing or deferring this application would bring a greater benefit to the borough, unfortunately. I do welcome the 100% electric charging. I do hope that the developer, if we are minded to approve, would consider fast charging points if the committee, again, does approve this. I do welcome the increase in offsite sporting contribution. I really welcome the provision of 3-bedroom homes in this development, in the affordable element, as we are in short supply of those. I would like to say, however, I see no reason why the shared ownership homes should not be pepper potted at the very least. And I really would encourage the developers up there to do that, to create a really truly mixed community of people. I do understand that there are issues sometimes with having rented accommodation in the same block as private market accommodation because of the costs, the service costs, and we want to keep costs low for those renting affordable accommodation. So in conclusion, I do hope that my colleagues will reconsider reconsider and support this application as echoed by my other colleagues on this committee tonight. And can I again thank officers for their thorough answers this evening.
Thank you very much, everyone, for speaking from the heart and feeding back your views. Before we take a vote on this, I just would like to bring back the point that Dan raised about the condition that if we were minded to support this application, that as part of the 106 agreement, there will be a legally binding agreement that this application, if approved, would be primacy. For the vote, can I have an agreement that that is part of the conditions that we're voting on? Agreed? Yeah. Okay. Good. Cool. All right. Thank you very much. So moving to the vote as in on the order paper, can I have all those who are against supporting the application?
3, Chairman.
Can I have all those not voting? Sorry, is it against? That's 4. Can I have all those not voting?
None, Chairman.
All those in favour?
6, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The application is carried. As I promised, I did say after about an hour and a half we would have a break. So it is also an opportune time for the public gallery to exit. So we will reconvene at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much.